There it is.
Hello.
We'll try.
I'm Stephen Coles. Welcome to our 10th anniversary symposium for Letterform Archive. I'm here with founder Rob Saunders, and we are celebrating our 10-year birthday this year. The archive was founded in 2015, and throughout the year we'll be having a series of events that will both look back at the archive's founding and also show how many of our community have used the archive in their work. And then we'll look forward to the future of the archive and to collecting graphic design. And so before we get to our program today, I wanted to talk to you about a few things that are coming up. So I'll share my screen and show you what we have in store. First, I want to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original inhabitants of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula. Indigenous communities have lived in and moved through this land over hundreds of generations, and indigenous peoples from many nations make their home in this region today. And we want you to join us in recognizing and honoring their ancestors, descendants, and all other members of their communities. So as I mentioned, it's our 10th anniversary, and we're really excited. In fact, the folks that are here in the room today got to have the first look at our exhibition that is just been installed moments ago. We've wrapped up the last labels, and Jen and John have hung the last objects with Paola and the collections team. Many people come together to put this show up in our gallery. And this is a pretty interesting show for us. It's very different than what we've done before, in which most of the shows have been a very kind of narrow view on a single artist or topic or theme. But this time it's a wide range of objects in the collection, and they are selected by the staff of the archive. So 10 different teams here at the archive each pick 10 objects that they love, and those are what are on display in the gallery. So we're excited to open up this show to on Saturday, and there will be exhibition reception from 5:30 to 7:30. And if you're a member, you can join us early for a preview and a tour. And it's not too late to sign up to be a member to attend that. Other events coming up, we have the wonderful RJ Andrews, who will be teaching an in-person workshop here at the archive on data graphics. That's Saturday, May 3rd. We will have a virtual tour. This is given by two of our great international docents on concrete poetry. And that will be on Wednesday, May 7th. This is virtual, so it's online. Anybody can attend this from anywhere online, and you can sign up for it on our website. And then I think this is our third or fourth installment of the Font Friends Hangout. This is a great informal way to just get together with other people who love type and lettering and graphic design. A lot of type designers, a lot of people who work in the industry, but others that are just enthusiasts like myself. And that will be Thursday, May 8th. So if you want to learn more about these and other events, check out our website, letterformarchive.org/events. One other quick announcement is that we have, as I mentioned, we have this wonderful docent cohort. They can give tours in over 15 languages. They are located all over the world, including locally. And these intro tours are back online and in person. So if you go to our website and go to the guided tour page, you can learn more about how to book your own. And then finally, please join us. We could not do these kinds of events without you. Our membership program is super critical to success of the archive. So if you want to have special access, discounts, and also just support a good thing, then please join us at litarc.org/join. So I want to thank Angie Wang, who is our new programming and docent manager, for arranging this symposium. Her idea was to bring both people from within the archive and who have interacted with the archive, and to celebrate this anniversary and approach a lot of different topics that are both inward looking, like this presentation will be, but also outward looking and more holistic in the way that we use archives in art and graphic design. So thanks for putting together the symposium, Angie, and we're excited to kick it off. And this is going to be kind of informal. I've got a series of questions for Rob. I've always wanted to ask him, and some of which he knows about, some I haven't prefaced to him, so he's going to have to just answer on the fly. But what we're going to do is take a look back at how the archive began, and actually before it even was a twinkle in Rob's eye, and have a sense of where this all started. And then what we'll do after that is look at some of the objects that I first saw when I first visited Rob's living room over 10 years ago, and also some of the things that he collected early on and why he began collecting. So I want to go back to Rob's living room. How many here in the space visited before there was an archive, just when it looked like this? We've got two people in the room. So when I first visited, I was invited by a friend of mine, Frank Grieshammer, from whom most of these photos come. He invited me over to this guy's place. He said, this guy has got all sorts of books about typography and calligraphy and lettering. And I thought I knew everybody in the type world in San Francisco. We used to have, events all the time. I thought, there can't be a person who's collecting all that stuff. I know everybody in the type world. But no, he had been hiding out in this wonderful loft here in the dog pat, or actually in Potrero Hill, just up the street. And this is kind of a look at what some of those early gatherings were at Rob's home. And I want to point out a couple of really key people here. Rob, tell me a little bit about Susie Taylor.
Oh, Susie. So Susie was a longtime friend. I met her in 1974 in a calligraphy workshop with Donald Jackson at Santa Cruz. It was a 3-week residential intensive, and she was in it. A bunch of other people were in it, and many of those people were the ones that founded Friends of Calligraphy.
The San Francisco organization.
The San Francisco organization, yeah. And so Susie was a longtime friend, and when I moved back to San Francisco, I visited her. They have a wonderful collection there at SFPL, and she was, even though she was in a way a competitor, she was always very encouraging about the archive, and she loved the collection, and she loved to hang out. And sadly, we lost her about 5 years ago.
And you say that she was actually not competitive in any way. And a really key story about this is this connection to Antonio Cavadoni, because it was through Antonio and then Frank and Tanya Raposo that I was introduced to the archive. So do you know the story about how Antonio was introduced to you?
That I don't. I know about Frank and Tanya. I don't know about Antonio.
Oh, okay. So the connection here that I am aware of is that the SFPL has a wonderful calligraphy collection. If you go to the 5th floor there's really a great rare books and calligraphy collection. And I know that Antonio Cavadoni, who's a type designer, he used to work at Apple. He's responsible, along with the team, for the San Francisco fonts, for example. And he's always been interested in history, in type history, and had visited SFPL knowing about their great collection. And so he introduced Tanya Raposo and Frank Grieshammer to Susie.
Oh, that's okay.
And then when Frank and Tanya went to visit Susie, or visit the rare book room, they were looking for one particular book. And she said, "Oh, I don't have that, but I know who does." And then introduced them to Rob. What was that, by the way?
It was Der Wassermann, and I forgot to pull it.
Okay, well, we should show that.
Maybe I should run down the hall and pick it up, because it really is a key piece. And when Frank and Tanya moved away from San Francisco, I found a copy of that and gave it to them. So they had been searching for it, and they came. Susie introduced them to me, and they came to look at the book, and saw a few other things, and then started to tell their friends like Stoof and Christopher and others.
So here's Tanya I think this is before the wall became what we knew as the periodical wall. So after Letter from Archive started, that's where all the periodicals lived. But this was basically your collection of books on your shelving at home.
Yeah, it wasn't all of them.
No, it was not all of them.
No, it was not.
I mean, it's a big wall, but it still was not all of them.
14 feet tall and 20 feet wide.
So Tanya was pretty instrumental early on, because she was kind of the first volunteer for helping to make the collection more consultable or accessible in some ways. And one of the things that I had just learned about is she was really responsible for this system, along with Rob, to bag and board ephemera. So those of you who collect ephemera, know that it's kind of a challenge to store and to organize. And so one of the setups that Tanya and Rob came up with is a bag and a board, which you can describe here.
Yeah, well, it's an acid-free bag and board.
We can show it after the slide.
Similar to what ephemera is often housed in. But one of the things that we wanted to be able to do is shelve them spine out and find them. And so we had to have a way to apply a label to the spine. And you can see in front of Tanya's computer in the left-hand picture, and then kind of between the label maker, this device, which I kind of hacked together. And basically you make a brother label and you put it in this track and you flip it over, you put the board down, and it comes out perfectly centered. This little guy squeezes it as you pull. And
for those of you who are online, we'll show this on the camera in a moment.
So these are, I'll pass one. This is, and I think the next picture shows what they looked like on the shelf. Yeah.
So this made these kinds of things much more accessible on a shelf, because normally ephemera is going to be in boxes or, bundled up together in albums or things like that. And suddenly there was kind of the workings of a library, even though you hadn't intended it to be that.
Well, the part of the story that we skipped is that Frank and Tanya had just graduated from The Hague, a master's program in type design, and they moved to San Francisco because Frank got a job at Adobe. But Tanya didn't have a working permit. And so after this adventure of finding Der Wassermann and coming to see the collection, we got to talking, and she ended up interning for me for a year from fall 2012, yes, until fall 2013. And that's when she helped with labeling, but also like the Dwiggins scrapbooks, which we'll show later.
We'll show you.
There were big projects to kind of organize and rationalize parts of the collection. But really the biggest impact was just bringing friends, because it was like, yeah. So
here are some of the friends. So my wife and illustrator, graphic designer, Laura Serra, there on the left. Tiffany Wardle, who's been working in the type world for a long time, there in the center, Tanya, and then Rob. And I love this particular slide because it shows kind of what we're doing right now. And they were thinking about this very early on. This is a camera SLR pointed down at an easel and connected to what then was probably a 4K the screen or something.
It was HD. I don't even know, but it was.
Now you're looking at a 5K display.
I'm always checking present, so.
This is an important character early on in the archive's existence, and because everybody who came loved Bella, and Bella was Rob's dog, as still is Rob's dog. And the thing I love about her is that she was never caused any harm to the books. She would always sit next to them. She would never step on them. She would never drool on them. And here's just another couple of early visitors, Ricky LaRusso, Jeff Kellum, Ricky, another type designer at Adobe. And I wanted to show this to kind of give you a sense of what it was like when we came to visit. There'd just be a stack of books on the table, and he'd say, "What are you interested in?" And I'd say Ben Shahn, and then he'd come down the stairs with piles of Ben Shahn, and we'll look at some of that in a moment. Last couple of slides here. This is just a picture of the room after the living room furniture had been replaced with big tables, because there had been, this change, this movement to hosting brunches and also having surface area to look at things instead of having the piles of books like this on the table.
Actually, this was in August of 2014. We moved out of the loft in the summer of 2014, and
yeah, essentially, we didn't say this, but the collection pushed you out of your own.
Yeah. It was easier to move me than the collection. So by this time, we had moved house elsewhere, and were in the process of converting the space to an archive. By the way, you see the lobster. Some of the things in these pictures were basically our cues for what to remember to pull, and a bunch of the stuff that you've seen in the slides is that also in the show and tell, because that's how we were remembering kind of what was around at the time.
That's sin.
That's sin. And so this is a very important day. This was the day of a brunch when I asked Mark Domination, who's sitting at the right there, who was at the time the chief of rare books of the Library of Congress, to join our board, in front of a table full of people he just shared brunch with. And he said yes immediately. So that was a very memorable day. And other early board members, Stephen was on the board from the beginning, and Sim and Sumner Stone there, other long-term friends of the archive, E.M. Ginger, who taught us everything we know about photography, and Travis is there? Who else is that? Russ?
Yeah, so Russ,
Jessica
Hish.
Jessica Hish, yeah. Well, the names are all there.
And then Sun Helen, who was also an early volunteer or intern.
So Tanya decided I think she moved to Mallorca after a year. And Sun Helen had just graduated from The Hague and ended up coming to the Bay Area and being in the exact same position, because Philip got a job at Google and she didn't have a working permit. So I had this 1 year with Tanya and then 1 year with Sun Helen, Hague graduates who helped me get it all started.
And this is actually one of the questions I had was, you had been collecting by this time for almost 40 years, or maybe over 40 years by this time. And we'll talk about what you collected and why, but what were your goals initially, knowing that at that point, you hadn't thought, I'm going to open this up to the public, but you did know people were starting to come and visit. And so part of that kind of organization project were you starting to think about how other people would browse the collection, or what were your goals?
Well, when Tanya started, I had no idea of opening the thing. I had been talking to institutions about it, I'd been thinking about it, because it was getting to be, a substantial thing that would have to be dealt with. And a lot of institutions were interested, but they wouldn't really promise to do anything with it. And so I was not sure what to do. And that's when this all started to happen. And so it opened a door for me. It basically indicated that there was an underserved need for this kind of inspiration and this kind of analog stuff that designers especially could have access to, and just kind of evolved into the idea of the archive. And it was a bit of an arc. Like I got the URL in the spring of 2013, sitting in the audience at Typo SF. And, finding
This is the
URL,
design.
basically, this is how you choose a name these days, right? So Letterform Archive was found sitting in the audience at Typo SF because I just had lunch with a bunch of the people who were like hanging out, and it just seemed like I needed a name. And so we had like social accounts and a website, and I did a Kickstarter. That was all sometime before the archive opened. But then in 2014, we incorporated and constituted the board, and took about 6 months to convert the loft. And then we opened in February 2015.
And so one of the questions I have there, though, is at some point you had to you had been collecting for all these decades for yourself, for your own inspiration. And we'll look at some of those things that you were collecting. But when did it kind of change for you that you are now collecting for other people?
Not really until after it opened.
So when you had first started,
that
it was like
was a-
about seeing your collection, but you weren't thinking so much about changing that
I mean,
scope.
I would say that in the 2 years or so before it opened, a few acquisitions were certainly influenced by the interests of the people who had started to engage. But just a few things, and just at the very end, because it wasn't really ever a plan. And so for the most part, the collection that we opened with was a very personal, idiosyncratic. I was just gathering inspiration around my own practice. And but that changed the moment it opened, because it immediately became clear that it was just the beginning, that it was very personal and idiosyncratic. It needed to be fleshed out in a number of ways. It needed to be expanded to really meet the potential.
And we'll talk about what those early experiences were like for me seeing the collection, but I want to kind of go back now to your first experiencing, looking at books of calligraphy and how that influenced your kind of collecting career, if that's what we call it. You tell the story about, well, first you started getting in calligraphy really young.
I did. I was serious about it by 16, and was fortunate to be introduced to the Newberry Library in Chicago at 17 and got a reader's card. And so that opened a whole door.
And what is a reader's card for those of us who are not visiting rare book stores?
Special collections and rare book libraries fall into a couple of categories. The most common is academic, and they're primarily for the folks in their own institutions, but you can often get in if you have a .edu or an academic letter or something. But they're not really open to the public. The Newberry is one of a different kind, like the Huntington in LA and the Morgan in New York, which started as major private collections and converted into private nonprofit libraries. So they're not academically affiliated. The Newberry in particular was always very open, and you could get readers cards. The last time I was there, you can get them at 14. So they're letting high school kids basically regularly access pretty much the full range of the Newberry. When it was 18 when I did it, and it required an exception to get one at 17.
So how did you get an exception? You were too young.
Well, so I got called into the office of James Wells, who was the curator at the time, and grilled for about 15 minutes. So he was basically like, have you read this book? What are you interested in? Why do you want to? And so for me at the time, it was all about calligraphy. And so I want to see writing manuals and manuscripts. Very simple, clear, focused ask. And his questions were around, well, what have you read about them? And what do you know? And what's vellum? And it's just, I don't even remember, but he was pretty intense. And almost a couple times in my life I've been grilled like that. The other one is Arnold Bank. That's a whole other story. But anyway, at the end of that, he called in the chief page and said, set the kid up. And in a couple of weeks, I was in the stacks with the chief page, John Aubrey, like browsing the writing manuals, which at the Newberry is bays and bays and bays. It's one of the best collections in the world.
So for me, this is like such a key story for your vision for Letterform Archive, because you had learned that there was this kind of wall between young people in your case, but also people who may not be academic or they may not be researchers, and access to rare books and rare artifacts of calligraphy or typography. And it seems like that's always been a key part of your concept for Letterform Archive, is that it doesn't matter what your background is, that we want you to have access to this material.
That's right. It's because I think that the existing infrastructure of rare book libraries isn't actually designed to serve designers very well. And the limitations on the way material is organized and pulled mean that you're using a text interface to gather visual inspiration. And so unless you have all this sort of background network knowledge, you have no way in. And and the Newberry was unusual in a number of ways. It wasn't just being able to have access to the collection, but once they knew I was serious and, you know, careful and only used pencils and followed all the rules and all that shit, they would bring out, you know, 10 writing books at a time, which was kind of like at the edge of the rules. And so you could actually, you know, compare.
So very different than a standard experience for a rare book room, where you have some knowledge so you know what to look for, and you look things up in a catalog, and the catalog is usually just text, you don't have imagery. And so then you list the things you want them to bring out for you to see. And that already
5 at a time.
5 at a time
in many places.
So that requires both knowledge and time, and you may
Patience.
not be able to actually see what you want to see. And that was a thing that you wanted to change. So,
but you know, this is a really interesting point. I was so spoiled, I didn't know about that. And because what happened is I got set up at the Newberry early. And then when I went to London, James Wells wrote me a letter for the British Library and the V&A.
you had no idea how hard it was.
So I went from one place to another and never got turned down anywhere. And so I didn't realize for a long time, there were people that came early after the archive opened, calligraphers especially, and they got emotional for this very reason. But I kind of didn't have that bad experience.
So let's look at what you asked for when you, or at least what are some of the early things that you saw when you were visiting the Newberry?
And this gets interesting in terms of why it's a thing we've thought about a lot here as we built the archive collection, because one of the questions becomes, oh, here, I was going to show where those are. Is that, yeah. So that's what it looks like on the edge. And this is the jig that does it. You do a brother label and you lay it in the track, and you peel off the sticky, flip it over, and then you slide the board in, push it down, pull it out with this little pressure thing applied, and it comes out like this.
So one of the reasons I wanted him to show this is because this hacker mentality, it pervades everything we do at the archive.
It's true.
I mean, just last week we had a rig produced so that we could, you know, install these objects on these heavy steel panels that were custom designed by Robin, the architect, here in our gallery. And that required another hack, another custom jig to make it all work.
With the help of my cousin who's in the room, who also,
Thanks, Stan.
yeah, who was responsible for building about half of the wooden furniture at the archive, all of the oak stuff. and has been a hacker companion for a very long time. So this is I didn't buy writing books early because they're kind of expensive, but also I I've been able to find them a lot, and I had spent a lot of time with them, and so they weren't a part of the collection super early, except for a few, and this was one of the first. So this is an edition of Palatino, Palatino's writing manual from 1578. So it's like 25 years or so later than the first edition, from the original blogs. And it's pretty complete. It's not well printed, but it also has a fragmentary, and you can see this is the handwriting of the dealer who collated it. But this is a fragmentary copy of the Tagliente, which is much, much rarer. And
You like swashes?
yeah, you like swat. So this is one of the, actually, it's funny because this figures in, oh, sorry, okay. So this figures into the first archive. It was one of the things that we featured. So that is here in the first brochure for the archive.
Oh, I like this question that has come up. Where are your cotton gloves?
Oh, where are you coming? Well, you answered that.
Okay, well, so if you've seen any movie where a librarian or a museum worker is handling rare objects, then they're often holding things with cotton gloves. But in terms of books, printed material, things on paper, your best practice is to have clean, dry hands because you're actually touching and feeling the object, and you're less likely to tear or rip or move it in an awkward way. And so we don't use cotton gloves, and most rare book libraries don't use cotton gloves. They just wash their hands, and that's kind of part of our process.
But I just learned today that we will need to use cotton gloves from now on for the tin book.
Yeah, certain materials, whether they're, if it's photo negatives, if it's metallic, then it does make sense to not use your bare hands.
So this book was in one of the photos that we saw at the beginning.
So something that you collected early on.
This came from the Verschbau collection. So that was actually about 2 or 3 years before the archive opened. So it was a fairly recent acquisition.
And while you're, a question I didn't ask was, what were you had looked at these writing books when you went to visit the Newberry and other libraries, but when you started to collect, what was your goal? What were you looking for?
It's always the letter forms. And that's the first thing that gets me. I mean, I'm totally captivated by design as well. And so it's not just about the letter forms individually or in isolation. But it's always the thing that gets me first. So this is a very important alphabet. This is Cresci in 1570, doing a Roman that kind of looks like, oh, I don't know, Baskerville or something. 200 years later. And also there's a lovely capital alphabet, which is not geometric. Yeah. Those are some of the best Renaissance Roman capitals. Same as this, basically.
For those online, Rob's pointing behind us to our half-scale replica of the Trajan column inscription, which you will see behind us when we're on camera.
So this was, Antonio is very interested. The Apple team came for a whole series of research visits over several years when they were working on the San Francisco family, and writing manuals was one of the things Antonio always wanted to see. And then one other one, and this was one that I had earlier, I'm just particularly fond of. So this is a Spanish writing manual by Palomares. It's 1789.
And Anna, if there are questions, we can be interrupted. This is pretty fun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the more beautiful italic writing manuals from Spain. This is interesting. This is, I think, just for pedagogical purposes, because there's no actual examples, but there's this very spiky thing to explicate the structure, and then immediately as you get the letters there.
So speaking of pedagogy, you started teaching calligraphy not long after you started exploring this world.
I taught at the Newberry, in fact, and some other places, and so my own experience with books and also collecting had a lot to do with teaching as well.
All right, we got too much stuff to show.
Yeah,
On to
yeah.
the next.
Okay, sorry. That's it. So next would be manuscripts, and for the same, first love being calligraphy, the same reason basically. And
so what you've been seeing so far are printed books. They've been printed with plates. And now we're going to look at manuscripts, which means that's ink on paper. These are the original books, and so one of a kind because they've been handwritten.
And by the way, as you might predict, almost everything I wanted to show tonight is out there in the exhibit. So.
Oh yeah, so we should mention that. So I was saying the 10 by 10 410 exhibition that's opening on Saturday. We had 10 teams, or actually 9 teams pick their favorite objects, but the 10th was actually what we call the foundation, and Rob selected 10 items that were in the collection before the archive started. So a lot of those things are out in the gallery that you can see after the event or when you come on Saturday.
Very similar to these things. And but one of the key things to know about the exhibit is that other than those 10, almost everything else has been added since we opened. So a big part of what the exhibit expresses is how the curatorial vision has expanded, but also the generosity of the community that's been helping us build the collection. So this was the first complete manuscript book that I acquired, as in not leaves or a section or a gathering, but the first complete book. And it's actually in a kind of sloppily restored but original binding from the 16th century. It has a colophon at the date, which is kind of nice. So here, finished, thank God. Day of the Lord. 1510 on the 23rd day of September at the 14th hour. And it's a liturgical manuscript of not a particularly important text. And but it has the most beautiful Roman hand. And let me see if I can, yeah.
So this is 1504.
Benedicite is how many Benedicites are there in that text? I just see it everywhere. Okay. 1510. And by the way, there's a fun catchword. Everybody know what a catchword is? Okay, so a catchword is in a book when the signatures are created, either manuscript or print, and that's the gatherings of leaves, they mark the last page of each signature with the first word of the next, so that the binder puts it together in the right sequence. So this Imma is telling the binder that this is the next signature.
That's a catchword.
That's called a catchword. But the really big story about this, and it actually kind of goes back to the Palatino Tagliente, because this was the first writing manual I acquired. This was the first complete manuscript book. They were both really, really cheap. because there's something about them that sucks. From the point of view of a collector or a dealer or like a fine rare book room, they would never touch these. In this case, it's the illumination. The illumination just sucks so badly. And there's a bunch of worming and it's just like it's not great. But the writing is absolutely magical. So I didn't care. And it made it affordable. And
Yeah, and I think this is kind of there. This happens a lot in the archive collection. Is that there are things with they may be washed pages, which is not something collectors love. They may be, tightly trimmed, as this one is here.
yeah.
But if it's showing the letter forms well, then that's all we really care about. In most cases, that's what we're really interested in for this particular collection. One more manuscript.
One more manuscript. This one is from 1813. And it's an English copybook. This is before steel pens. So this is crow quill. Every line. This is a manuscript.
This is a manuscript.
Here, there's my thumb for scale. It's kind of nuts. You can, for the people in the room, just to get a sense of. And so this was a thing, this just captivated me. The craft of it. It has this beautiful, really kind of miniature Roman text. And then also nice script. But the borders, so these are, look at this, these are all different. Wait, there's a section. Here. The notes.
So I think one of the this is a key point for me in terms of visiting an archive and seeing things in person. So even the folks that are in the room are struggling to understand how tiny this stuff is.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so key that we be able to access it on a desk, on a table in front of us, hold it in our hands. And that is a key part of the Letterform Archive experience, is that we want people to not see these on a Pinterest board somewhere, because it's so difficult to understand what you're actually looking at on screen.
I'm so
You
glad
really
we
need to
killed
see
the
it in
shadow.
person. Yeah.
I'm so glad we killed the shadow. This is pretty good, actually. Yeah, so this is just kind of, I mean, one of the things that I've always been fascinated with, because I'm a calligrapher and a lettering artist, is craft. And we've always collected process and things that show off craft. And it's also the thing that just always blows people away, especially folks now that are like, everything's digital. They've never experienced analog craft, or they have to make a choice. Yeah.
Seeing it in person, Peter asked, is a public exhibition possible or an exhibition at East Coast University? I would love to bring some kind of exhibition to Monmouth University, New Jersey. You have 2 gallery spaces here.
So the question for those who didn't hear it online is that about whether we exhibit outside of Letterform Archive and other places. And we have traveled small pop-up shows to things like TypeCon and the Typo Berlin conference when that was running. We have a show that just closed at Aspen, which was our first exhibition in our gallery here, Bauhaus Typography at 100. And we have had other things loaned for other shows around the world. So we do want to continue to have traveling exhibitions and to loan for other exhibitions. So it's definitely a possibility. The other thing that you collected early on, oh, you have another example here that you want to show. Oh, the autograph letters. I was going to say Russian, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This one, it's funny, one of the tables in the photographs had, so this is a whole box. I took a few choice examples out of their sleeves so that you can see them properly. But this is a whole box of autographed letters by calligraphers and type designers. So here's Beatrice Ward. 1952. Irene Wellington, 1953. She was an amazing calligrapher, but also wrote my favorite handwriting instruction manual. So if you want to learn how to do italic handwriting, you want the Irene Wellington writing book. Imre Reiner. Oh, the letterhead is the best part.
Using his typeface Corvinus.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, what's this one? This is Chico. He didn't do a Proctor, did he?
I don't know.
Yeah. This is Rocky Steinauer to Rudolf Ruziker. Rocky Steinauer had one of the best italic hands in America. This is James Hayes, who was in Chicago.
And did you mention how these were collected?
So I've acquired a bunch of these over different, random things, especially the type designers. But the handwriting samples, you see a lot of Mr. Carr and Mr. Hardacre, because Ed Carr was a friend in Boston, and among other things, he organized a show of italic handwriting. So he asked people to write him letters, and he had them all. And Kenneth Hardacre did the same thing in the UK, and he had them all. And so this is, anyway, there's too many rabbit holes. I got to move along. This is Paul Standard, American, New York calligrapher, wonderful, very Renaissance hand. This is T.M. Cleland, the type designer. And by the way, the prose too, like this is just another world. Tom Guerdy, probably the most famous author of italic handwriting manuals. Beautiful cursive hand. Okay, so that's a little sidelight. That was on the table. Oh yeah, the Russian stuff. So
besides calligraphy, what other things were you interested in letter form wise?
So the avant-garde, and so these were things that we had when we opened, and this is also, I mean, a lot of these areas have been expanded in depth since we opened, but there was kind of a poor collection at the beginning. These are just two Russian covers, Osiprik and what's his name? Can't remember. It'll come to me. And then this, which is the Marinetti, kind of Marinetti's magnum opus. Which is unopened. Oh, I hate to, we have to open this. So this is another collector thing. So when books are made, they're often folded from gatherings, right? And you can see that this is an unopened signature. It hasn't been broken at the top. And collectors prize these because it means it's never been opened. But the first thing we do around here is we open it, because I don't care about that. I just want to be able to get at it. I think this is not the original copy, because I know I had one that was opened. We at this point we get a lot of duplicates, so things. Yeah. So yeah. So this is Marinetti, 1915.
And so how did you go from being interested in calligraphy to the avant-garde and other parts of graphic design?
So calligraphy was, when I was a teenager, and I never really lost it. And I did a lot of kind of commercial and lettering type stuff. But I broadened my interest in graphic design in college. And so it just kind of expanded into type and graphic design pretty naturally.
So this is an example again of something that you might have seen that composition in a design history textbook, in some kind of website that gathers avant-garde classics, icons of avant-garde typography. But until you see the book and understand how it folds out, you don't really know how it was originally issued.
And so this is an example of a thing that is, smack dab in the middle of the graphic design history canon. And most people, a lot of people who were coming to see it, you and others had seen this, somewhere. You'd seen pictures of it. So you were aware of it, but you'd never seen it in person. And that was a big part of the early magic, was just, seeing things in the flesh.
So another thing that you collected was 20th century, kind of mid-century design and book jackets. Oh, there's one more page here. Okay, it's that one. Scrap ring.
A lot of the avant-garde concrete poetry, sort of shaped text stuff, is sounding poetry. There's a very deep common thread of that, which
So I bet this also.
yeah, oh yeah, that's a good one. So this is Stu wanted this, I think, because of the fun collecting story behind it. So one of the things that I think I won't take these out of the plastic.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time.
So these are book jackets by George Salter, who was, I think, the greatest calligraphic book jacket designer of the last century. Just, extraordinary work. And so the question is, how do you gather a collection of book jackets? And here's the way I did it. So every city has an annual giant book sale. Around here, it's the SFPL sale. When I was growing up, it was in the Chicago area. It was the Brandeis book sale. And it was the same thing. It was like shopping carts, a huge warehouse, tables piled high with books. And in the 70s and 80s, when I started to discover this stuff and look for it, one of the things that I would do is I'd go to the big book sales as often as I could. I'd roll in the cart. I'd find all the Salter jackets and the Grushkin jackets and the Mimwoods and all the great dust jackets. And of course, they're wrapped around books, but the books are just a couple bucks. So I roll the cart out, buy them all, strip the jackets in the parking lot, donate back the books, and go again. And so I could fill this is like 200 Salter jackets. I did this in a couple of years of the Brandeis book sale. And please don't tell that to book dealers or like,
This is not being
Oh my
broadcast in any way.
this is like not what jackets off books. Oh my God, that's a beauty. So anyway, Salter is magic, and you can understand maybe why I did that, but that's one of the things that I did.
The other nice thing about Salter, once you start learning about designers that you love, often they were teachers of other designers you would love. So Jean-Yi Wang and Philip Grushkin, other book jacket designers that we have a large collection of, and they were students of Salter.
All right, the last thing I'm going to do is a little Wiggins, because it's part of Tanya's. One of the things she worked on the most was these scrapbooks, and just do this for the room. So there are 5 of these. This one is artwork and tear sheets, and in each case, she basically laid out all the ephemera and created Mylar containers for them and made it into a coherent scrapbook of the Wiggins collection, which then eventually became our first book. This was all Tanya, and it took a lot of time, and we don't have this time anymore, this kind of time. Oh, here, I know what this is, actually. This is Electra. So this is a wonderful collection.
This is one of the first things I saw when I came to visit. And as a type nerd and knowing a little bit about Dwiggins, but not having seen proofs before, not having seen experiments of, metal type design, it was super fascinating for me to get a sense of the process of making metal type through these albums, because what these are steps along the way to getting a final typeface in metal.
So this whole scrapbook came from the estate of Paul Bennett, who worked at Linotype with Dwiggins on his typefaces, especially the promotion of them, but was kind of on the distribution list for all the proofs and kept them. And so it's a fascinating thing. This is, I'm going to feature this because I think it's really quite magical. This is a proof of Electro. It's on a handmade paper, so it's intended to have some ink squeeze and to be beefed up a little. And that's one of the ways that you'd see. In fact, you can see the watermark. You see the watermark? You kind of can, right? And I think it's a Wattman. It's a very nice paper. The left hand has a tighter leading and thin spaces, and this these are all linotype. This has greater leading and wide spaces, and so it's a kind of an experiment both in the typographic color on a soft paper and in the typographic color varying leading and space settings on the wide side.
You know about what year this is?
These are all dated somewhere. This is 37. Electra would be
Yeah, right.
30, yeah, around then. This is Caledonia.
And so a lot of these have the same kind of text with those different kinds of leading, spacing settings, but then on different paper stocks. So you can see the way that they would proof things so that they could get a sense of what would happen with this type in a variety of different situations.
So this is an oddity called Charter, and you can see at the bottom an experimental line typeface by Dwiggins, October 1942.
So if you get Bruce Kennett's book, the first book that was published by Letter from Archive about Dwiggins, then it goes into a deep history about all of these typefaces and especially the experimental ones. And he gives a really great talk about that as well.
So there's, I'm not going to go into detail. There's a lot in here, and for aficionados and people researching Dwiggins typefaces, this is actually a pretty important resource. But along the same lines of showing different typographic color on paper, when they got a book face to a certain point, they actually started producing book signatures, and they would produce them on a variety of papers. So this is the same setting, an 8-page signature on a hard coated, and then on a softer, let's see, and so the typographic color variation here is basically because they're being proofed on different papers to test exactly that.
So I wanted to pull some things that I first saw when I came to visit Rob. So what he would do is you would show up with some friends, and often he'd have a bunch of nice food there too. That was he comes from the hospitality world, so that was part of his thing. But he would sit you down on the sofa and he'd say, who are you into? What do you like? And I always loved Ben Shahn, but I had never seen much more than a couple of books of his illustration and lettering. And this is, not one of the first things I saw, but this is a really amazing thing that you wouldn't see anywhere else because it's the original comp of his Haggadah. And so this is, I think, gouache or
Gouache on paper.
And so that is his kind of final artwork for what would be, well, not final, he says this is a rough. And this book is also full of notes about the book design here as well.
Yeah.
So it's in Hebrew and in Latin, and then it has, of course, his incredible illustrations.
Basically a markup for a reprint with a new jacket. And the jacket is the comp of the new jacket.
And so I was thrilled to be able to see things like that from Ben Shahn, other books that, you know, you've probably seen before, but maybe others that you haven't. And one of the great things about Shahn is that he had a very particular illustration style, but he also has a very particular lettering style, and they just go together. And that was one of my first introductions to how lettering and drawing can integrate and come from the same hand and from the same voice. Another thing that I saw,
I've got turning pages.
well, we're out of time.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, one other one for
It's
you.
so good.
All
All
the
the
letters,
letters.
yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And you may not know
Oh,
that
yeah.
one. That one's really fun too.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I saw early on. After we look at a couple of these pages.
Okay, all right.
So another thing I saw was this, and I was like, I was so confused because first of all, I'm not a calligrapher, but also because it's such a interesting object. And tell us about Anne Heckel, who designed this.
So Anne Heckel is a British calligrapher, and I spent 6 months in London in the late 70s and studied with her. And this was her set of pedagogical cards for the foundational hand. And what she did is did overlays over the basic structure, showing how every letter relates to the O. And it's showing the pen angle and the, you know,
So for me, somebody who is not a calligrapher and is just starting to understand, you know, where these shapes come from, where the shapes of type as well come from, this is such an instructional piece. And again, something you could do interactively online, but the tactile nature of these just make it very special. And that was, you know, one of the things that really struck me when I first visited, and also something you wouldn't get in a bookstore because this was just people who attended her courses, right?
yeah, she taped them together herself. I don't even know what the additions were. They didn't, you know, was for her students mostly.
So the other stuff that I saw early on, and it'll be easier for you in the room to see this when you afterwards, you can come right up. But were the posters for the Fillmore, and you know, basically key examples of what we think of as psychedelic art in the Bay Area. But I had only seen kind of you know, parodies of this style. I'd never seen a lot of the original posters, and I never really knew the names of the designers. We're looking now at Rob's collection of Moscoso, Victor Moscoso, still here alive in the North Bay. And Moscoso was the best at color. He made basically this vibrating color by putting two different hues next to each other, but with the same tone. Basically doing what you're not supposed to do if you want something to be legible. But also brilliant with letter form and illustration. And seeing these things in person also helped me understand, okay, what really is the best of psychedelic artwork and lettering. It wasn't kind of the fonts that I had been familiar with. It was this holistic composition of, again, kind of like Ben Shahn, letter form and illustration integrated. And so where did you collect Fillmore posters?
Yeah, so the first Fillmore poster I bought was the first weekend I lived in San Francisco. And it was in an old kind of a state shop on the Visadero. And it was a Wes Wilson. And within about 5 years, I had this collection. It wasn't, at that time, it wasn't very hard to find them. eBay was fairly new and quite active in this kind of stuff. And for many, many years around the Bay Area, these were $1 a piece in all record stores. Because they printed them in volume, they reprinted. So,
And then there were these poster swaps, right?
oh yeah, yeah.
This one animates if you use a black light and flash it, then it's
Yeah.
basically a flapping
It's a flat
angel.
bird, yeah.
Is there a name for them? For that kind of.
Question, I don't know. I just say they're animated, but I don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
There was an exhibit of those at the Hague City Arts Center.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit extreme.
Yeah. So Moscoso went to Yale and studied with Albers, and his description of his color when he came out to San Francisco is, I did the exact opposite of everything I saw.
So another one of the people you met pretty early on was Rudy and Susanna.
Yeah.
Tell me how you met them.
Okay, so this is fun. This is about a year or two before the archive opened. There was a publication party at Tom Ingles' studio with that wonderful outdoor courtyard for Leonard Cohen's book about Wet Magazine, which he had designed and developed. And Rudy and Susanna were there. And so Tom introduced us, and I said, oh, I'm a big fan. I have a complete collection of emigre. And they said, no, you don't. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, the first thing they said is, no, you don't. Are you sure? And the second thing they said is, do you want to sell it? Because they're always, at the time, they had like standing orders from institutions. They were always trying to get sets. They couldn't complete like the early tabloid ones. And so there was another kind of local thing that I hadn't, I had a few issues when it was running. But I completed it when I moved out here. It's kind of like the psychedelic things. Over a few years, it became a project. And the early tabloid ones are hard. They were hard even then. And but that led to them coming to visit. And then a year after we opened, that led to them giving us their entire archive, which included this.
May have to bring that up to the. So what you're looking at here is the board that has the artwork for reproduction for the logo of Emigre, and you can see the way that they've cut the stems of this typeface, which by the way is called Empire, not too different from the name Emigre. And then their adjustment of the bars. And I still haven't got an answer from Rudy on this, but I always think that it's a reference to Mertz, the avant-garde magazine.
Yeah, I think so. That's because Spitters did that. Very similar thing.
So the issue of Emigre that you're looking at underneath is one that all the issues of Emigre are available in our online archive. And in fact, that was one of the, I don't know if stipulations or desires of Rudy and Susanna when the archive came here, is that it would be accessible online. So their magazine was an important part of the standard that we set for how should we display these things on the web, in the online archive. And we wanted to make sure that it was high resolution enough that you could read it, even the small text in a magazine like this, but still, can load on the web in a convenient way. And this issue was a really key one about the domination of the Macintosh computer when it first arrived on the scene in graphic design, and has great interviews with lots of well-known designers about how the computer was changing graphic design, both positively and negatively. And it's a really, really good read for anybody who wants to understand design history.
But it is a very challenging target to make all of this text readable on the web.
So if you go to oa.letterformarchive.org, you can check out every issue of Emigre, and it really is some of the best history of graphic design between the mid 80s and 2000s. And
the next show after this one is a major Emigre retrospective.
We're letting that out of the bag already.
Accompanied with, you know this, it's already booked to travel, it's like a thing already. So Yeah, and with a major monograph that's tabloid size and 500 pages and 100,000 words by Emily in the printer. So that's coming along.
Are there any questions, Anna?
Peter asked, do you have any of Michael Harvey's work in the collection?
Oh,
We do.
yeah.
We don't have it here.
I don't know if we have any original work, but we've got his wonderful instructional textbooks. We do have some
We
original.
have a collection of about jackets, dude. Remember the shopping cart?
No, but originals. I was talking about like original art.
No, original artwork, no. But there's a collection of about 30 or 40.
Oh, so the question was, do we have Michael Harvey's work? So Michael Harvey was a British lettering artist, did hundreds of book jackets. Some kind of similar to what we're looking at with Salter or Philip Greshkin, who we have a large collection of. And he also wrote these wonderful instructional manuals for lettering and calligraphy, and mostly hand lettering, the way you build up letters by drawing and sketching them. And I highly recommend those. Those are pretty accessible online. So what are we looking at now?
Oh, this is a manuscript by Rudolf Koch, but I just didn't want to have it on the blank thing.
So Rudolf Koch was another collecting point
Yeah.
for you. What was interesting?
Calligraphy
to you
and
back
type, that intersection. So anybody that was really into calligraphy and type in the 20th century, I'm all about them. So Schneidler, Koch, Zapf, those are all German. But actually a lot of the great type designers were also pretty great calligraphers and or lettering artists.
So what is the main thing that has changed from collecting for yourself and then now collecting for
Oh,
others?
God. It's completely different. From the moment that we opened, I knew that we needed to flesh it out in certain ways, and it became a real goal. So first, to some degree, kind of enriching and filling out the canon, but also almost immediately pushing beyond that as well. And so, I don't know the exact count of the countries in the show, but I think it's over 30. And we get donations now from all over.
And another thing that is always informing what we collect is visitors, because every person who comes in for a research visit or a tour or to the gallery knows something that we don't know. And we are always, humility is a big part of our, hosting practice. We want to always be learning, and we're always getting new ideas about what we should be collecting from the people who come to visit the archive. So it's come through, our staff, it's come through our visitors, and it's come through also new work. And you'll be learning more about this as we go through the symposium and if you come and see the show, but you'll see that, 90% of the stuff in the show has arrived since that initial collection, and yet builds on it in a really, I think, natural way, because it's all about letter forms.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or any other things you want to see? We have more things on the cart, but we don't want to keep you.
Yeah, we do.
You're all
We're kind of out of time, but the folks in the room can come and look at things or ask us to do more. So this is a manuscript book. It's I think it's from 1912. Yeah. And just a brief verse text in a Fraktur that's virtually identical to his Freuling typeface.
So it's fun to look at this and look at the type specimen of Frühling and see, how it was inspired by his original calligraphy. Yeah.
Do you maintain any list of collection areas or items you are interested in?
That's a great question. So it was about, do we have a list of areas in which we're interested in acquiring more? We have kind of a broad mandate right now, which is underrepresented people, places, and scripts. And so that is a lot. When you think about the Western graphic design canon, there are many, many different directions you can go. So one example of this that we're really excited about is finding experts in different scripts from Asia, Africa, the Swana region, and asking them to help us locate lettering books, handwriting books, instructional calligraphy books, because that not only is kind of telling a history of how letter forms are made in that place, but for those who are not familiar with those scripts, it helps us learn them. And so that's one like of many different directions that we're trying to go. And we recently brought in about 40 of these incredible mid-century lettering manuals from China, thanks to Synoptic Office in New York, who helped us because they have an office on the ground in China and helped us bring in some of those. So we have some things from Thailand. There's something in the show actually that is Thai, and we're always collecting more from Arabic and Persian speaking countries, and that's a big part of where we're focused right now. Another early thing I saw when I came to visit was Ladislav Sutnar's work. And if you don't know Sutnar, a Czech designer who immigrated to the United States in the 30s, 40s. And what he was so great at was organizing information. And one of his big projects was for the Sweets Catalog Company, where he took these really disparate kind of industrial supply catalogs that were all over the map. Every company, every brand had kind of their own design, and then made it standardized in some way. And yet it's not rote or boring. His standardization actually makes it more interesting
I know,
somehow.
but what kills me about these, especially this one, it's a perfect example of Sutnar where the typography could be done yesterday. The industrial design looks so old.
That's true. You look at the photographs and you're like, now I know that's not from yesterday, but if you look
Yeah.
at the design. But yeah, it was really great for me to be able to see a huge series of these catalogs at once when I came to visit early on, because it really gives you a sense of how he was standardizing this whole catalog system. Whereas if you're just looking at images, one by one online, it's really tough to get a sense of that, I think. Yeah.
Go ahead. You touched on this earlier, but you had to make a decision whether to put your collection in an institution or start your own institution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a big step. There's been a lot of collectors like Marvin Sackner, the artist books, who spent years trying to get his collection into the right institution.
Yeah.
What was your thinking on starting your own institution?
It seemed like it'd be more fun.
More fun or more control?
No, well, the difference is being able to realize a vision about how it would be used and shared.
Yeah, I think one of the things you've said is that if it went to a place that, almost all institutions, if you donate something of scale, of large size, they will first say, thank you, and we'll take $1 million or whatever to help us process it. And then they'll say, it probably won't be available for 10 years, 15 years, because we don't make it accessible until it's been cataloged and processed. So one of the big things that I think Rob decided early on was, as the collection grows, of course we want to catalog it. We want to make it accessible, worldwide in that way. But we wanted anything that came into the collection to be as accessible as possible, as early as possible. And that was very different than a lot of the places you would have donated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to ask about photography, because you photograph things for publishing purposes and for putting things on the web. But I remember seeing a setup in your place quite early on. So I'm just kind of wondering how your photography activities came along as the archive plan came together?
So, I had met and worked with E.M. Ginger, who has a company called 42 Line in Oakland that specializes in digitizing rare materials on paper, and has worked with Library of Congress and a lot of the big rare book libraries around the country, establishing a standard for captures. And the first time I worked with her was on a Kickstarter project for a calendar, a 2014 calendar that was funded at the end of 2013 and delivered and photographed by Ginger based on some of the stuff in the collection. And it was just extraordinary, the difference that her refined technique makes. The use of raking light, the control, you know, the resolution, but also the color management. So she kind of established that standard, and it was in fact a part of the concept from the beginning. What's funny is we opened in February 2015, and the first camera rig was set up in February 2015, and we just replaced that back. That camera back was 100 megapixel back in 2015, which was state of the art then. The new one is 150, but every one of those captures has enough detail to do like blow-ups in books. We don't have to reshoot anything. And so one of the things that I realized around that time through the experience with Ginger was that the tech had reached a point of stability and advancement where, like, all the institutions that jumped in early 25 years earlier were redoing shit. But I feel like we started well and we followed through. And so yeah, I love that. So yeah, it's repro is a thing that matters a lot to us, and the way that it's represented in the online archive is important, because if you're not here, you don't get to touch it, but at least you can have a more tactile sense of it than with standard photography.
I mean, try to capture that with a scan, that's not gonna work out.
No.
Or a book printed on paper towel. This was one of the books I wanted to bring out because Romano Hani's book,
Show.
it's in the show, so I couldn't bring it, but
Yeah.
this was one of the first things I saw too that had been recently acquired by Rob before the archive was opened. Everything here is made with metal type or you know, spacers or rules, and it's printed on paper towel. Oh, look, somebody in the room here designed this. Design is
What are you
play.
looking at? Is this a table?
No, these are just examples of how the photography gets detail.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look at the texture on the vellum. That's very subtle. So yeah, it's it just always seemed to me that graphic designers would appreciate the best standard here. So
Any other questions?
They said the type on the Russian concrete village.
Oh, the questions about the you mean the Marinetti book? Yeah.
the Marinetti.
How was the typeset?
So I'm pretty sure that those Marinetti plates, the foldouts, are printed from photo engraved line blocks. So they're printed by letterpress. And the question is, what's the master? And it looks like it must be some kind of collage. So basically they would create the design and then photograph it and make a letterpress block to print from.
There are other ones that are letterpress on the, I mean, I don't know which
Absolutely.
ones, but
Yeah,
I
well,
remember seeing.
Ilyazin.
Ilyazin,
Which
yeah.
is in the show.
Okay, another thing to see in the exhibition.
Um, Actually, that's unusual in that way. That's fine. Yeah.
I guess I can turn it off the camera onto us now, but. Any other questions, anything else that you want to see before we depart?
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody who is online for joining us. Oh, you have a silly question. I thought you had said my question was a silly question. Okay, I will take your silly question.
So Rob, you got the library card, it's age 17.
Yeah.
So when did you start buying ephemera? And how
Oh.
could you afford to do so?
Yeah. So at the beginning, I wasn't really, well, first, I still don't think of myself as a book collector because I kind of don't like that. Would like to think of myself that way. Anyway, I hope there are no book collectors in the room. But it started with just kind of the usual kind of reference books in college, like things that you were required to buy, and then you find a monograph or a whatever. And I started to go to estate sales and stuff, but it was mostly secondary material and not very expensive.
In college?
In college, yeah. And then I was an educator for a while right out of college, and I had begun to collect a little bit because of one specific thing, which was looking for reproductions of scripts and type that had enough detail to study from. And that led me to colotype reproduction and the stuff that was done in the early 20th century with all the great types and scripts that. So I started to look for that material in the antiquarian market, and it wasn't super expensive at the time, but it was hugely, because you can use a loop and you don't see dots, so you can actually study a script or a type and see it properly. And that's a twofer. That's how I get into collecting, and that's how I got into repro. That was the beginning of the antiquarian market, though, because colotypes you don't find in estate sales. And so by the early 80s, I was in the publishing business. I started to make some money, and then it kind of got out of hand. So I don't know, does that, yeah. But at the beginning, it was really not. And also, I never thought I'd have, like, this thing was never the plan. Like, until 12 years ago, I had no idea that I would do this.
And I'm lucky I was around when you decided to leave.
Well,
I was fortunate.
no.
Well, thank
that's
you,
for sure.
everybody, for joining us online. And for folks who are in the room, you're welcome to come up and take a closer look at things if you'd like. And we will see you at our next event. Make sure you check out our website to know what's coming up, or sign up for our newsletter. And we'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.